Before you stands Julian Criart Playson, the troublemaker from a branch of the noble house Criart. Back then, when he walked down the school hallways, every girl's heart skipped a beat for him, even without noble blood. But those days are over. The man's reputation on the battlefield is now a total nightmare. Everyone knows the hidden legend of Julian, and they tremble when they hear his name. A genius in both sword and magic. He's famous for slashing through hundreds of demons with that twisted, psychotic smile on his face. And as for mana control, it's beyond legendary. But the scariest part is, Julian can see people's fear or anger through the colorful auras appearing around them. Because of this monstrous power, even his own family is scared to death of him. Even his own kin are plotting to eliminate him because he has the potential to seize control of the clan at any moment. There's no doubt the old Julian was exactly the villain they feared, ready to seize the mainframe and spread terror. But here is that dark secret no one knows. The real Julian is already 6 feet under. The scumbag inside that body right now is actually a reincarnator from another world. Believe it or not, an elite gamer named Lee Seho from the modern world was obsessed with a game where the main character gets killed by the villain Julian Criart. Lee Seho would have hated this character, but that's just a twist of fate. The gods trapped him in the body of the very villain he hated. Only problem is he's got the body but zero fighting skills. Now he has to play a part so no one realizes that invincible Julia is actually weak trash. To keep up this lie, he must act as ruthless and intimidating as the original Julian. While proctoring an exam, things got messy when a student accidentally bumped into her. Everyone thought the old Julia would have vaporized that poor kid right then and there. Looking around, he saw everyone covered in purple auras, the color of pure terror. Then, one of the instructors, Aileen Donacia, stepped onto the stage. He was the only one in the room who didn't have a purple aura. He was a magic prodigy in his school years, and now he's become a professor. Who knows how much she hates Julian since they were classmates. Suddenly, a purple light began to flicker around him too. Our fake villain used his most polite yet insulting remarks to trick this girl, who's actually the one who knows the real monster. The plan worked, but in a strange way. Instead of her aura turning purple, the girl's face flushed bright red with embarrassment and a strange excitement. The truth is, Julian didn't want to be bad. He was just trying to project that cool, dangerous villain image just to survive. On his second attempt, he kept his cool and declared that the price of failure was a death duel. He expected the girl to beg in tears. That way, he'd be the bigger person and just drop the subject. But the girl called the bluff. Won't he burst his aura and accept the duel? If he was going to draw a sword on students, he should have stepped over my body first. The raw intensity of emotion on the girl's face was something to behold. Julian was expecting hatred, but this was completely unexpected. And since he has no power at all, he is actually in mortal danger right now. When the girl turned and yelled at the students to run, Julian acted just as his crazy reputation suggested. He attacked from behind and shattered the girl's large hoop into pieces. The girl went into shock. A mage is vulnerable at close range, but something was wrong. That red face was definitely not normal. Julia's attack was strangely weak. The girl was scared, but in that moment, the perverse feelings she'd suppressed for years came flooding out. Years ago, she saw Julian as an idol, an unreachable god. Even if she wasn't of the highest nobility, she was perfect in his eyes. No girl could resist him. He was no exception. They had everything: beauty, grace, and talent. He finally confessed his love but was harshly rejected. That aura of hatred Julia saw was actually the reflection of a broken heart. Seeing the aura of fear and hatred vanish, our hero glided like a ninja and made his final move. But instead of hitting him, he gently placed his hand on her head and said the war was over. A duel like this would usually end in blood, but Julian did something completely out of character. He said he'd never use his sword to cut down a being as beautiful as Lady Aileen. All they wanted was to find the exam hall. This move totally fried the girl's circuits. Why was this psychopath acting like a platonic school crush? But what about that bloody fame after graduation? As they walked, our hero thought about that sentence the girl said. The girl was talking about that special technique Julia used to infuse mana into her sword. When the original Julian did it, the sword would glow blue, looking as if he were holding moonlight in his hands. Using this weapon, the young man had sent countless demons to hell. With a mix of fear and respect, people called it the Moonlight Greatsword. This sword technique was Julia's signature, so it was nearly impossible for your incompetence to mimic it. The fact that Island noticed the change in the fighting style was a harbinger of disaster. So our hero made a choice. He couldn't let the girl become any more suspicious. He turned to the two young men following them and asked if there was a problem. Trembling with fear, the youngsters said there was no problem and moved on. Finally, the three of them reached the training area. Opening the door with that famous annoying smirk, Julian burst in and apologized to poor Eileen for being late with an accusing tone. Right after, she formally introduced herself and announced that she would personally lead today's entrance exam. Our silver-haired devil was absolutely sure everyone knew exactly who he was. Heron started scanning the crowd with those devious eyes. Her eyes finally locked onto someone, the famous second son of the Torso family. This family was known for their uncomfortably close relationship with the Creepard dynasty. It was pure chaos since joining the Union of the Blindfolded was such a huge honor. Normally, the entrance exam involved a bloody beatdown with an instructor. If Julian had eliminated the Torso family's precious son during this process, the Council of Elders would have used it as an excuse to finish off our boy. Heron rubbed his hands, believing Julia's notorious reputation would end right here. The young man turned to the candidates and asked the blindfolded ones if they really wanted to enter. The young people could only say, yes, in a shaky voice. The silver-haired boy shouted that he saw nothing but a bunch of cowardly weaklings before him. He mocked them for their naive eyes that had never tasted life's hardships and for the swords they carried like toothpicks. The place they wanted to enter was the Empire's most psychotic site, and as their senior, Julian would give them a small preview of the disaster that awaited them. The exam was starting now, and the only requirement was to take out Julian Creepard. Terrified whispers rose from the crowd. They all looked like they were about to wet themselves. Julian held his sword like a king, but inside, wires were flowing out of him like a waterfall. The young man thought he could bring everyone to their knees with this bluff. Heron approached and reminded him not to slack off, even if it was just an entrance exam. Our guy, who bailed when fighting Aileen, had now landed in the middle of a real duel. This could lead Heron and the other students to realize he wasn't actually that great. Plus, without her sword, ice would be deflated, and everyone would think her fame was just a bubble, or the rumors about her memory loss were true. Under this massive pressure, the poor boy froze up. Worse yet, if Julian acted suspiciously, that crazy girl could pounce on him at any moment. Eileen's eyes were on him like a predator watching its prey. Griping his sword tightly, our protagonist racked his brain for a way out. The best strategy was to push their buttons and provoke them. The moment they took the bait, he announced in a mocking tone that the exam would only end when he died, or when not a single candidate remained. But the students were frozen like statues in fear. No one had the strength to take another step. Julian stood tall before everyone, looking like a man of his word. Suddenly, a trembling hand rose from the crowd. A pale, terrified boy announced that he wanted to withdraw from the exam. Before long, other hands began to go up like dominoes. Among them, the second son of the Torso family also looked at those cowards with disappointment. The boy, clenching his teeth, didn't want to admit defeat, but eventually gave in to herd mentality, and raised his hand too. None of the instructors there could believe the comedy unfolding before their eyes. All the participants ran away with their tails between their legs. Julian put his hand to his mouth and let out that famous crazy laugh of his. His cape billowed in the wind like a flag of victory. With everyone running away without looking back, the exam was the last thing on anyone's mind. The plan went smoothly, handled as easy as pie. Julia's role as the villain had let her get away with it. The young man wonders how this situation affects his training. He wondered if the general atmosphere of fear was making the girl even angrier. But when you looked at her face, there was no sign of anger, nor any negative energy coming from her. Julian began to think his pure talent had started to fade. Yet, what happened reminded the young woman of those legendary moves Julian Sunbay made in the old days. You know, those days when he beat his rivals just by scaring them, without even drawing his sword. A moment later, in the headquarters of the blindfolded, someone called out to the silver-haired youth. It was Hare who came to congratulate him on his performance. Julian didn't seem particularly proud or happy about this praise. The moment he placed his hands on the Hare's shoulders, the poor man began to tremble with fear. Relieved to see his talent still working perfectly, Julian said the ring did the real work. But another young man jumped in excitedly. With hearts in her eyes, she said Julia just worked wonders. This guy Lazarette, who handled the unit's administration, mumbled that it was a huge honor to meet him. After everything that happened, it turned out that the rumors about Julia losing her memory were nothing but a lie. The exam ended without a single punch thrown, but Julian was already tired of all the chatter. Lazarette excitedly explained that the Torsa family was among the participants, but that didn't stop Julian. These words stung her like a needle. Fuming with rage, the man pointed at Lazzaretti and asked what he meant, wondering if he intended to humiliate the boy for failing the exam. Saying such things was unacceptable for those who knew the deep bond between the Torsu and Krypart families. Julian took charge, saying in a very calm voice that there was a misunderstanding. The Yumuk Eyes Guild can't stand the stuck-up attitude of noble families, so they only open their doors to commoners and outcasts. Naturally, they fire that pointed question at Juliana, "Aren't you a noble too?" Ours responds with a sharp and bitter laugh. It says he's just an insignificant side branch member, nothing more than a loyal lapdog for the imperial family. That innocent boy from the Torsa family agreed to take the exam, knowing full well he'd be eliminated in the second round. It's a textbook case of naivety. Maybe his family is using this humiliation to teach him a lesson, or there's something much filthier going on. Maybe there's a dark plot unfolding behind this entrance exam. When Heron hears this, he starts to shake as if he's seen a ghost. He's clenching his fists, breaking into a cold sweat and thinking, "Oh no, I'm caught." But our silver-haired guy suddenly starts acting like a clown to lighten the mood. He's brushing it off, saying it's probably just a misunderstanding. Of course, Heron is still as nervous as a prisoner on Gallows Hill. The fear of getting caught is deeply ingrained in the child. Julian is making subtle threats. If it's not a misunderstanding, it'll be a bloodbath. Luckily, Julian is returning to the safety of his castle. When the servants see him, they bow low in fear to greet him. The young man glides through the hallways with that creepy smile on his face. When someone asks for food, he refuses and turns to that poor girl. He orders that no one be allowed into the study. The poor woman accepts, trembling before her master's psychopathic aura. Finally alone in his room, in his own kingdom, he throws his sword on the table and drops onto the couch after a tense day. He had immediately noticed Hiro's cowardly reaction. There's definitely a catch, maybe even a giant trap, in this exam. He got away with it today, but luck won't always be on his side. If the guild exposes him soon, he'll get kicked out of the family. That damn sword on the table catches your eye. Knowing she couldn't use her sword today is giving Ai stomach cramps. Because using that sword doesn't just mean slashing, it means having absolute power to crush others. With things as they are, he decides to grab that cold metal again and try his luck. Let's see what happens this time. Maybe if he tinkers with it, he can awaken the gun's power. A faint blue light fills the room as he draws the sword from its sheath. When he completely releases the barrel, he examines it as if it were a living being. He grips the hilt tightly and raises it into the air. But as expected, that legendary moonlight power doesn't just show up instantly like, no way. Life isn't that easy, of course. Julia's innate talent in this body makes her a sword master. The moment he grips the weapon, he sees the path to slash and carve. This ability is a gift she's been blessed with since she was a baby. No matter the sword, it's like a toy in his hands. But unfortunately, in this world, swinging a sword isn't enough. There are thousands of meatheads in the Empire who can swing a sword as well as Julian. But what's really going to make it stand out is something else. That massive gap in the use of aura or mana. That's the real issue. That's also what kept that previous, sickly Julia alive. He weighs the gun, thinking of the skills in his new body. Playing with mana is like playing with a bomb. If the energy backfires, your internal organs could scatter like popcorn. The mere thought is enough to give you chills, but fear is of no use against the inevitable. Sooner or later, he has to prove his strength. If this world's rules of logic match the game he played, Lee, who sank thousands of hours into it, can pull this off. He needs to pump that pure energy gathered in his heart into the meridians, the body's mana organs. Think of it like plumbing. 6 of the 38 organs, including the head, are connected to vital vessels. So if he makes a mistake, his brain could fry. The essence of meaning meets the heart right there. That's why he must fire up this area. Alright, time to start the engine. Julia's blood-red eyes open and she feels her aura fluctuating. He puts his hand on his hip within. I did it. Look, now he needs to transfer that meaning from his body to somewhere else. The resistance is tougher than expected, like a wall pushing back. But his ability is enough to overcome this obstacle. Suddenly, the sword's blade begins to glow with the cold brilliance of true moonlight. But his joy is short-lived. The light goes out immediately. It shone, sure, but like a faint crescent, weak as a flickering candle flame. Still, it's better than nothing. The first crescent of the moon has appeared, after all. A while later, our hero is working up a sweat on the training field. He's surrounded by those poor puppets waiting for a beating. Getting focused and taking an attack position. No mercy. One hand holds the reins while the other pulls the bolt. Like a flash of lightning, Julian passes right through the puppet. And boom! Wood fragments are flying around like confetti. Julian breathes a sigh of relief. At least it's not embarrassing. He realizes he's reached the level of a knight. Next up is completing the Moonlight Sword. But my game knowledge is running out. He needs to find someone tight-lipped who knows him to ask for advice. Right then, a servant appears out of nowhere beside him. She calls out to her master, saying he has a guest. Aha! Could this be the opportunity he's looking for? Is fate finally smiling on you? Unfortunately, things only go from bad to worse. The one who arrived is that insignificant leech, Lazarette. Our silver-haired friend's face turns sour instantly. When Lazarette realizes Julia remembers his name, he's as happy as a dog getting a treat from its owner. How could anyone forget someone who chatters like a parrot in front of Julia? This is either insane courage or sheer stupidity. Our silver-haired swordsman cuts through the chatter in one move and asks what the man wants. The trembling rookie stammers that he's here to confirm the Vale Academy exam results by the commander's order. With the results clear as day, it's such useless bureaucracy, but procedure is procedure. Julian's reluctantly putting up with this nonsense. Turning his back, Julian orders you to tell them that not a single person passed the exam, and to give them a big fat 0. Right then, a devilish idea comes to his mind. Poor Lazarus is about to bolt, but Julian nails him to the spot. Ours wants to confirm if this news will go directly to that Grand Commander. In that case, he says he wants to deliver the news in person. Lazarus's eyes are about to pop out of his head. When Julian puts his ice-cold hand on the boy's shoulder and offers a ride, the kid's face turns as white as a sheet. The poor kid is terrified and asking what he did wrong, but our silver-haired friend is just trying to be polite. What a huge irony, though. The point is, the kid shouldn't go back alone. But Julia's got a reputation that's hard to shake. Everyone is scared to death of him. Now that things have come to this, Julian plans to seek advice from that famous commander. The leader of the blindfold must know old Julia inside out by now. With the closed eyes involved, even that snake-like Crayford family wouldn't dare stick their noses in. Panic fills the air in that magnificent gold-leafed castle. A uniformed soldier yells at the top of his lungs, telling his commander about the disaster. With a trembling tongue, he stammers that the horrible person has arrived in the flesh. Julian Crayford is right there at the door. The commander takes this terrifying news with an icy calm, as if he were just listening to the weather report. It's as if her gaze hides 1,000 secrets. By the way, the palace of the Adrian Empire is quite dazzling, isn't it? Our boy probably wouldn't believe it even in his dreams if he saw this view in person. 3 major powers dominate the continent of Rosenda, and the Adrian Empire where Julia is pacing around right now is the biggest boss of them all. After Demon Barbados was sealed, the ruined lands were united under an iron-fisted monarchy and grew into a giant. Faced with the palace, a symbol of this power, Lee is dying inside, watching around in wide-eyed admiration. But looking from the outside, Julia's face is like a stone wall, not a single muscle moves. Mistaking Julia's giggles of joy for a death warrant, Lazarus is about to wet himself in fear. Then something crosses this poor guy's mind. Normally, to reach Her Highness Juliana, you'd have to jump through hoops and get past all the servants. But now the man has gone and brought an ordinary citizen with him, right to the commander's feet. May it be for the best. And the people around obviously sense this strangeness. One leans into the other's ear and whispers that he thinks the young lord is wounded. But the man is fit as a fiddle. Everyone's starting to think those memory loss rumors are just nonsense. It's a great honor for poor Lazarus, actually, but he's about to faint from excitement. He'll give up the ghost right here. Julian grins happily, talking about the grandeur of the place and explaining that this is the main entrance. He says the captain is relaxing somewhere behind the second door. Lazarus is confused. Shouldn't a member of the Closed Eyes know this place like the back of their hand? The boy is getting suspicious. Or is this a loyalty test? And Julia's disdainful looks are just the icing on the cake for this theory. To him, retesting a clumsy rookie like himself seems perfectly logical. Let him writhe in his own hell. Julian is just busy staring in awe at the pixels from his computer screen coming to life. She finally notices the boy's gone pale and asks if he's okay. Lazarus, trembling, fake claims he's doing great. The amount of gold in the palace is so vast that its shimmer even pierces the horizon. The tension rises as we get closer to the target. The poor kid can't help but ask if he passed the test. But Julia has no clue what's going on. She's just staring blankly at him. He just brushes it off, saying there's no test and that testing it would be a total waste of time. The kid takes it as, "You've already made it, champ," and is over the moon with joy. Juliana says her thanks and slips away immediately. He walks away whistling, leaving our hero behind in total bewilderment at his strange behavior. A soldier approaches and says the captain has granted permission to meet. The moment has come to face the big boss, Captain Odwin Balladeer. The sole heir of the Balladeer dynasty, a legend who truly earned that captain's chair with his power and leadership. He's the only man who can deal with those troublemakers called the Closed Eyes. They only answer to the imperial family. Lee gets super tense just thinking about the guy's real-life charisma. Her heart pounds as she approaches that glamorous door. He's asking if he can come in. But the voice from inside says, "Come." The person in the captain's chair shows no trace of the imposing figure he expected. Contrary to expectations, instead of a bloodthirsty monster, what stood before him looked like a doll. Captain Odwin Balladeer greets Julian with an innocent face and asks if he's injured. Julian's brain short-circuits as the captain looks like an elementary student, yet he makes a superhuman effort to keep a straight face. But the girl is so short that it makes her even more confused. Lean remembered the captain as someone small, yes, but he didn't expect a kid who'd look perfectly normal in a high school uniform. Right then, the atmosphere suddenly changes. That tiny index finger is pointed right at the tip of Julia's nose like a deadly spear. Odwin asks in an annoying tone if he's going to make another joke about his height. The young man tries to save face with a strange, defensive denial, feeling deep in his bones that the terrifying charisma radiating from this little one is no joke. When she brings up the wounds, Julian folds his arms behind him and starts sweating. He has no clue what he's going to lay. Even though he knows the game's script like the back of his hand, he's aware he must choose his words as if walking through a minefield. Worst case scenario, he could lose his head. Even though the original Julian was a stuck-up narcissist, he was dog-loyal to the Squint Eyes organization. So you must stay in character and be respectful. He bows slightly. The young man offers his thanks for your kind concern. In epic language, he states that his wound is no mere scratch, yet it will never shake his loyalty to the Empire. A damn tense silence fills the room, one that even makes the crickets go quiet. The captain puts a finger to his lips, eyes him for a moment, then suddenly slams his fist on the table, shattering the silence. He leaps to his feet and storms toward Julia, growling that something is wrong. The young man shuts his eyes tight, wanting to wake up from this nightmare. The captain presses his sword's hilt against the boy's face and questions his way of speaking. The woman claims he's acting like a stranger. Terrified Julian can see the dark aura emanating from Odwin. This is the color of denial. So the woman really senses that something is fishy. The one whose head is all messed up. Lee is trying to remember how the real Julia treated this midget boss. With a sudden move, he grabs the hilt of the woman's sword. No more playing defense from now on. He decides to get arrogant, just like a total villain. This move is for the girl who hates her weapon being touched. It's infuriating, of course. The captain turned around, saying he only visited his headquarters once in a blue moon. It reminds her that she just dropped off the report and ran. So, this model employee behavior is highly suspicious. Lee thought Julian had already crossed the line between work and private life. But it seems that was just his own arrogant assumption. The young man explains that since injuries kept him off the field, he wanted to come and show his face in person. Then our hero decides to adopt that same cheeky and shameless attitude the original character had. With that famous mocking smirk on his face, he asks as if shooting a poisoned arrow. Or will she also be the one to decide when you feel like coming? Bet you heard she's been acting strange since she was injured. But he says he's fit as a fiddle. Still, Advin talking like this gets on Julia's nerves a bit. This woman is definitely not normal. A total pain in the neck. He immediately gets to the point of the exam and asks if there's any real talent. Julian, garbage, it's all garbage. Diz says there's no one there. The captain acts as if he already expected this answer. He says a student of a legend like Hayden Reich won't just like anyone who comes along. Still, he insists on asking. Geez, wasn't there even one person capable of being an intern? The boy refuses again as Advin reads the paper in his hand. The anger in your voice is hitting the roof. Did you really fail every single one of them? Julian nods, with that grin of his that defines thick-skinned audacity. The girl's turning into a powder keg and asks why. But the young man stays calm and just smiles in an annoying way. The captain is now fuming with rage as he repeats his question. He stands up with such force that his beanie flies off his head. He's shouting that the organization is starving for recruits and even one person would be a godsend. But Julian hits the nail on the head. It's not like we're gonna hire every complete idiot we see just because we're short-staffed. According to Advin, even among those losers, there could be gems that would shine with proper training. But the young man thinks it's a total waste of time. But in truth, it was just an excuse our laziness made up to avoid fighting those brats. The fed-up young woman shouts to get Julian out of her sight. But before leaving, the young man has an offer. He reaches into his jacket pocket and leaves a mysterious white envelope on the table. Inside the envelope, all the logical fallacies from the current entrance exam are laid out as neatly as a poem. Confused, Advin takes the paper and begins reading this document of insolence. The report says participants didn't realize what these squinty-eyed people were up to, and the captain reluctantly agrees. Realizing the candidates have no idea what kind of hell they're stepping into, he continues reading what the young man wrote. One of the sentences said that those squinting eyes of an applicant would never take no for an answer. Accepting no responsibility. This is actually an open threat that sounds less like a warning and more like holding a gun to the candidates' heads. While Julia glares with those psychopathic eyes, intending to kill, Advin asks a logical question, but only gets a laugh in response. Ours doesn't even deign to answer with that annoying, sarcastic laugh of his. After all, he's sitting in a fancy seat at the top of the Shut Eyes organization. He's definitely too arrogant to get involved in the organization's internal politics. The captain sums up the situation in his mind like this. So that was the reason he didn't let anyone pass the exam. He didn't want the headache after crushing the participants. Julian grins, confirming the observation. Even if they were accepted, it's a mystery what that junk would do in this Empire-linked agency. Our boy is obsessed with not forgiving those who stain the names of nobles. Advin is fed up with Bogazil Zaid's tantrums and his shifting attitude whenever the Empire is mentioned. The captain says he'll pass the letter to the council, but he's dodging the issue by giving no hope for its approval. Thinking the chat was over, Julian's about to head out, but she stops him, signaling they're not done yet. When Advin mentions a special package from the Empire is coming to his office, his face lights up and he says thanks with that famous fake smile of his. Leaving a confused captain behind, Advin looks at the letter in his hand and thinks about how dark the writing is. We are not responsible for what happens in the exam. Clause is just a fancy way of saying if someone drops dead, we'll sweep the body under the rug, and it won't be a crime. That's exactly the nature of this brutal ordeal. The participants are either penniless peasants or fallen nobles whose honor is broken. These paupers with nothing to lose aren't even in a position to complain, no matter what happens to them. Silencing the cries of the weak is child's play for the system, after all. Julian likely leaked this because he caught the council and the Tosa family rigging the exam. This letter isn't actually an answer. A veiled declaration of war, saying, "I know what you're really worth." And if they ever set up a scheme like this again, no one can save them from Julia. This is his way of taking revenge on that rotten committee. The girl's deep thoughts are interrupted by a soldier's voice. The captain hands the bombshell letter to the soldier, and the council commands it to be delivered. While obeying the order, Advin remembers that Julia used to be known as the royal family's loyal dog. But it seems that well-behaved dog who once obeyed its master has snapped its leash and is turning into a monster showing its teeth. The thought of this ego-driven monster breaking its chains makes Advin shudder. He shouldn't take his eyes off this kid. Because Julian isn't just a soldier anymore. He's a loose cannon ready to blow at any moment. Meanwhile, Julian arrives at his office in shut eyes. Normally, no one in this organization has a private office. But for privileged types like us, the rules can be bent, of course. One wonders what the private room of such a massive organization would look like. It's probably an ultra-luxurious place with gold leaf. And bingo! Julia's lack of taste is obvious right away. Expensive but creepy decorations. Look, weird unrelated objects everywhere. Fancier and more extravagant than his own home, this room looks like a serial killer's art gallery. He stumbles over the junk scattered on the floor as he enters. Turns out our charismatic assassin is actually a messy hoarder. There's a knock at the door, and he's told to come in. Here comes that poor, pushed around intern Lazarette again. He is there to deliver the letter from the Empire. With that blank, stupid smile on his face, he hands over the envelope. This must be the important message the captain mentioned. Just as the boy is about to slip away, Julian stops him and drops another chore on him. He orders him to carry those freakish statues in the room to the car. Lazarette asked in surprise, "All of them?" When asked, Julian ruthlessly confirms. The poor boy is biting his lip with joy. Poor guy is so brainwashed he thinks manual labor is a reward. Fired up by dreams of a promotion from intern, he immediately starts loading those heavy artworks. He hugs a large chest but trips over the trash Julia threw on the floor and falls face down. Luckily, neither the bones nor the statues break. Instead of getting angry, Julian watches the boy with his famous condescending smirk. Lazarette starts trembling with fear. One look is all it takes. The kid's terrified, shaking in his boots, sure he's about to be punished. To lighten the mood, Julian uses that sick sense of humor of his. "It'd be a huge pain to clean up your body if you die here." He's mocking me, saying don't die. Once the moving is done, our silver-haired psychopath decides to read the letter. Examining the envelope while waiting. The imperial seal on it looks original, just like in the game. The letter begins in an unfamiliar but fortunately legible handwriting, stating who the information belongs to. Basically, they're saying as soon as you get better, get back to working like a slave. This is a polite way of saying we've got you on a leash, and we're coming. Even so, Julian sees this as an opportunity, a field mission to keep his sword skills from getting rusty. Target the resonant stone. According to the game's lore, after the demon god Barbatos bit the dust, the world turned into a monster den. The wreckage of that goddamned god either possesses the living like parasites or rises in physical form to wreak havoc. Demons plaguing this cursed world have risen and begun to devour humanity alive. And the gadgets that stop them, they called resonant stones. Dusty relics from ancient times, shaped by mages with mana. Since our Julian isn't some wizard, it looked like he was going to have to protect some nerdy type to fix the stone. The mission was dangerous, but he had no excuse to refuse. If he succeeded, he could shut everyone up about those disgusting rumors. I wonder which unlucky wizard he was going to babysit? After all, working with these stones required a talent that not everyone possessed. While praying for someone sensible, a brown-haired girl in Adderton Palace stretched, looking weary of life. This girl had already learned, and even as a professor, she cursed her fate for still having to write reports like a common laborer. Satisfying the imperial family's endless demands and constantly proving oneself was probably a mage's ordeal. He startled at a slap on his back. Green-haired Diana appeared right beside him. He was asking what you were looking for in the palace. Seeing Eglin like a zombie, Diana invited her for tea and gossip, but her brain was fried from thesis writing. The poor wizard refused, as he didn't have a moment to scratch his head. Diana implied that he never lost his inner nerd from his student days. Just then, Diana's eyes lit up as she pointed her finger at Julia's brand new car that had just arrived. Only the branch members of the Cryhart family would wear that emblem. So the one who came was definitely our boy. Diana took a jab, saying she heard Julian was on his deathbed, but the guy's walking around like a Turk. He grinned when he noticed the oddity in his friend's posture. Or did you still have butterflies in your stomach for this guy? Back then, Eli was such a naive lover that he fell for the lie that confessions under a cherry blossom tree were never rejected. She wanted to sink into the ground, remembering that embarrassing moment she dragged Julian under that tree. He suddenly backpedaled to escape this traumatic conversation. Suddenly, he had an incredible amount of free time for tea. But Diana added fuel to the fire back then by telling everyone in school that Julian was sick, and that it was nothing to be ashamed of. Julian was a totally different person back then, though. After returning from the Northern Front and joining that dark organization, the man had completely lost it. Diana asked if she should go and say hi, but Eileen didn't want to get involved at all. Just because he liked it before didn't mean he loved it now. It would have been better if he didn't see Julia's sour face. But when he pulled an envelope from his pocket and said he wouldn't be back to the palace for a while, everything changed. Diana looked at the envelope in shock. It was an official order from the imperial family that reeked of trouble. Aileen was stuck with the task of repairing a resonator stone. Outside, the spearmen were ready for action. As one soldier grumbled about why there was so much security, it became clear that even the Blue Knights were involved. This wasn't just any ordinary job. Now that even the famous Julian has joined the team, things are bound to get messy. The soldiers are talking about the lie that Julia lost her memory. They couldn't imagine that a monster like him could be wounded. But our leading man, he's enjoying these rumors as he hears them. He felt smart for accepting the task. Then, 2 knights of the Blue Lions named Paran and Heinlich approached and started sucking up to Juliana. Supposedly, the 3 of them would join forces to protect the wizards, but what would happen along the way was a total mystery. Maybe they would face those terrible demons. One of the knights asked why Juliana didn't just get in the carriage. Supposedly, they were doing Julian a favor so he could rest while they handled the mages, but their intentions were twisted. Our guy didn't buy this fake politeness. These nobles, the Empire's official soldiers, had other motives. They feared Julia, from a sub-industry family, would steal the heroic spotlight and deflate their ego. But because lounging in the car felt more tempting, Julian accepted this sneaky offer. Just as he was gloating about pulling off the betrayal so easily, everything flipped upside down when he let the name of Sorceress Al slip. Julia's eyes widened in shock, but before she could process the news, her worst fear had already come true. The famous wizard introduced himself with a fake smile, but immediately noticed that face he never wanted to see there. Breaking into a cold sweat, Julian turned to Paran and whispered to forget the car deal. The plans had changed. The poor girl was shocked to see her former flame there, and then watch him turn around and try to run away. Julian looked like he'd rather go to the depths of hell than stay by Al's side. But the soldiers, unable to see the heartbreak and panic inside Julia, completely misunderstood the situation. They thought her refusal to get in the car was a move to assert her authority and thwart their sneaky plan. It's exactly the kind of what I'd expect from someone who survived that snake pit of a palace all on their own. What insolence for a side branch royal to look down on soldiers just because of their bloodline. But our Julia has only one thing on her mind. No one told her that the sorcerer she'd be protecting was that annoying brat. The poor girl isn't too happy about the situation either. The tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife. So, he decides to finish the job at warp speed to avoid having a breakdown from seeing her. He spurs his horse so hard that the poor animal loses its breath, and they end up in that tiny town of Julian. They arrive by imperial order, but it's like a deserted ghost town. No one's out to greet them. Finally, a young delivery guy notices them and walks up, saying they must be tired from the trip. When the guy was taking them to the resonant stone, Aileen grabbed the box, saying the stones are very sensitive to mana and she should carry them. But the young man who greets them wants the girl to come along to check the stone that needs restoration. When they arrived, the scene they saw wasn't encouraging at all. There's a sickening crack at the bottom of the big blue rock. Our magical girl examines the stone and breaks the bitter truth. It's beyond repair, need a new one. The barrier will be temporarily disabled. Girl, don't be afraid, it feels like it'll take 2 minutes, but as she puts her hand on that stone, I can smell disaster coming. Juliana needs to tell him the barrier's lifting, but even looking at his face makes her sick. Yet, with that damn sense of responsibility from being a teacher, he has to act professional. He goes up to her, but she just turns away and starts acting out again. The girl insists, she says it's important. But questions keep spinning in his head. Why is this guy running from her like she has the plague? Finally, he can't take it anymore and grabs the man by the collar. Why are you running away from me, man? They're asking to hold them accountable. Julian is a master manipulator. He acts like he's not running away and says you're clinging like a leech, flipping the script to play the victim. The man speaks with such confidence that our naive mage almost believes him, and Aileen says now is not the time for this. As for our Julian, with that famous annoying smirk on his face, he's pushing her buttons by asking what's so important to the lady pervert. And that naturally drives the girl crazy. But a thunderous explosion cuts their sweet banter short. The demons have already stormed the city, it's a bloodbath out there. Eyes instantly lock onto this monster invasion, and Aileen gasps, shouting that without the barrier, these creatures could swarm them at any moment, basically saying, "I told you so." As the echoing scream sends shivers down the spine, a familiar silhouette approaches our protagonist. The traitor appears right under his nose, but Julia's gaze suddenly turns into a look of terrified concern. Right behind the traitor, sharp horns stained with the soot of war rise up. A two-horned demon is busy mowing down a battalion. The creature that emerged isn't just common trash, it's a double-horned disaster. Aileen tries to jump right in, but Julian stops her, saying it would be suicide since he's OP. Meanwhile, the demon's roar shakes heaven and earth. The poor girl shivered at this massive. He's trying to plan how to deal with the monster with that tiny brain of his. The demon screeches orders to the other freakish creatures in a foul, grating tone. One of them has his eyes on the girl and is about to strike. But our lead acts fast and lunges forward, gripping his sword tight to shield the girl. At the same time, he tells her not to lower her guard, not missing a chance to provoke the girl even in the middle of this chaos. He calls him out, saying it's amateur to be shaken by such a small threat. Julian says sword fighting suits him better, and that everyone should stick to their own turf. Our girl, starting to stutter in fear, asks what to do like a confused duck. Julian points his finger and hands the real grunt work, repairing the stone, to the wizard, saying he'll protect the lady at all costs. Then, with that famous annoying attitude, he provokes you by asking if your little teacher forgot what to do out of fear. Stung by these words, Aileen rushes to her task in a panic, blabbering that it will take about 7 minutes. Right before moving away, he shouts Julia's name and begs her not to die, reminding her she is not a healer. Our hero grabs his sword and gives a flashy answer, claiming that getting hurt at this level is impossible for him. But like outward appearances versus inner reality, a storm is raging inside Lee. Because he never even dreamed of encountering a two-horned demon this early. He wants to run away without looking back, but too many eyes are watching, and if the rumors start, his charisma will be ruined, so there's no escape. So our helpless hero starts wondering what the hell the real Julian would do in this situation. Fortunately, his thoughts are interrupted by the clanking of armor. The Blue Lions finally make a grand entrance to join that bloody dance with the devil. The moment they step onto the battlefield, they pounce on that foul creature as if intent on dancing with death. What stands before them is a pure monument of terror straight out of a nightmare, challenging one's very sanity just to look at it. Julian, the Blue Lions and the Spearmen, who will likely be first to die, are taking their places. One naive soldier among them comes up with a tactic to chip away at the creature's health, as if he's playing a video game. The poor soul thinks he can slowly chip away at that massive demon's health bar. On top of that, he cracks a deadpan joke like digging his own grave and asks Juliana if she's terrified of these two-horned killing machines. But in his dictionary, the word fear was never written. Factory settings, born daring. But right then, that unexpected event occurs, turning the atmosphere ice cold. You should have seen the look on those soldiers' faces. Our silver-haired maniac burst out laughing and they were terrified, of course. Ours is acting cool, but if it were the real Julian. He thinks he'd grin like a maniac even on the brink of death, so he's just acting. The horned demon on the other side isn't waiting at all. and he swings a sledgehammer of a punch at our so-called hero. But ours seems to be taking a sick kind of pleasure in this. With the reflexes of a master swordsman, he opens his eyes wide and dodges the enemy's move as smooth as butter. And he delivers the counterattack. Perrin is in shock. With a single strike, blood and foul fluids gush out of the monster. It all sticks to our boy's face. While the kid smirks like a psychopathic killer, the sword in his hand begins to glint in the moonlight. The young guy gets hyped and speeds up. And he charges at his opponent as if running toward his own death. With an artistic leap in the air, he swings his sword, aiming right for one of the demon's horns. With his attack landing perfectly, our swordsman puts on that creepy smile again. But the demon's huge red eye is locked onto the boy. Julian is about to pay the price for his carelessness. The demon's head hits his face like a sledgehammer. Our badly injured lead actor is completely dazed by the impact. The pain is so great that even breathing becomes a torture. Julian thinks even a worm will turn into a dragon when cornered. No giving up, he stabs his sword into the monster's skeletal body and lunges for the eye. Then he crashes so hard that he literally digs his own grave in the dirt. The soldiers have begun to tremble with fear. And Perrin is trying to act like a leader in the middle of all this chaos. Then one of the soldiers shouts at them to look back. The child's silhouette still stands amidst the dust and smoke. It hasn't collapsed. The sword in your hand is glowing blue, brighter than ever, like a disco ball. One of the soldiers recognizes this glow immediately. This is that legendary Moonlight Greatsword loyal to its master, and this time, it's at full power. Everyone on the battlefield is left speechless. Watching that legendary sword everyone is talking about. The sword isn't even at half of its true power, but things are already going south for the monster. Julian walks toward the demon, ruthlessly firing blue lasers from his eyes. Our young man is officially out of it. Even the demon feels that insane excitement behind the coming strike. But this crash shakes our main man up too. The monster looks clunky, but its attacks are lightning fast. Luckily Julian can anticipate them all. Because he has the cheat-like ability to read his opponent's moves. He's completely focused, fending off every attack coming his way. He twists his body like a snake to dodge the monster's lethal blows. The boy's red eyes are locked on his target. The watching soldiers are all left speechless by this talent show. And Perrin finally realizes that this kid's fame isn't for nothing. By then, the resonance stone is almost ready, with only minor details left for the skilled mage to finish it off. The girl leans on the railing and announces to everyone that the barrier can now be opened. On the battlefield, some stones begin to fly around the demon, confusing the beast. Julian seizes the moment, thinking how foolish it is to be distracted in the middle of a battle. He lunges toward the monster's head and delivers a devastating blow with his sword. Zigzagging in a streak of light, he flashes through his opponent and slashes the creature right where it stands. This display of skill leaves Eileen speechless while the soldiers stare, mesmerized. The demon that was once everyone's nightmare now collapses like a puppet with its strings cut. As the monster crashes down, our hero turns around and strikes that classic cool pose. And finally, this tough battle ends with Julia's victory. He can hear the whispers of the crowd around him. Our moved hero realizes all his efforts were worth it. Everyone is both scared and impressed. Because after all, Julian is a certified villain. It's only natural for those who see his power to wet themselves in fear. A voice calls out to the boy, but he's still lost in his own world. A pair of hands reach out and grab it. One of the soldiers. She thanks him with all her heart for fighting. The poor guy's so relieved, he admits he thought they were all going to die. And a small celebration begins among the warriors. Perrin approaches and thanks the swordsman for his hard work. But you can't miss how incredibly tense the guy is, sweating like a waterfall. Julian puts his arm around the warrior's shoulder and asks them to handle the rest. Because he's just not used to emotional moments like this. Perrin now understands that Julian is different from everyone else. A star that shines even among nobles. Staying this calm after facing a demon like that is not humanly possible. Moving away from the crowd, our hero goes to the edge of a clear lake and sits down to take a breath. Once the dust settles, he finally realizes just how absurdly dangerous the situation actually is. He's reliving that helplessness, fear, and panic he felt when facing the monster. Their hands are still shaking like a leaf. In real life, things aren't like in games, they're much scarier. It feels more like these are Julia's experiences. He wonders how you live as if you are nothing. The kid pushed himself so hard to get into character that he even scared himself. And wondering if thoughts change along with the body. A single question echoes in your mind. How powerful was the real Julian? Combining Lacey's devious wit and Julia's combat veteran experience, the result is a total cheat code. Now our hero had gained a sadistic ability that deals extra damage the moment an enemy wets themselves. The weak points are clear as day. With this talent, clearing all suspicion will be child's play. But there's that damn moonlight sword problem to deal with. It's like a construction project custom made for the character, but left unfinished. It's incomplete, flawed, and just sitting there in the hands of its owner. As ours slid the sword into its sheath, those ugly scratches on the blade gleamed like silent screams of the struggle that had unfolded. Getting this scrap to work makes no sense. Its power and balance can't even touch the original. A total disappointment. But when the word balance echoed in his head, a devilish light bulb went off in that cunning mind. As he gave his reflection that nasty smirk, distant waving flags and hooded figures lying in wait signaled that trouble was coming. Suddenly, a sharply dressed man threw open the doors to that assembly of fossils called the Ancient Nobles Association. When one of the hooded figures ordered him to sit, poor Heron collapsed into the chair on trembling legs, looking like he was about to wet himself in fear. The interrogation had begun, and they were eager to see if Julia's dirty laundry had been exposed, and how she reacted. The Heron confirmed everything with a terrified squawk. Yes, that brat had found out everything, absolutely everything. One of the nobles spat out his venom without beating around the bush. He already knew this klutz would mess everything up. If it weren't for those strong family ties behind him, this wimp would have been worm food underground long ago. Another hooded lord intervened. Stein's actions were strange, and they had made a sneaky offer to the Imperial Secretariat. That's when Heron dropped the bombshell and threw the new rule on the table. Shutai would not be held responsible for any disasters during the entrance exams, or even for any dead bodies. Even death was allowed. The noble's face darkened at this, while another flew into a rage and slammed the table. This was basically waving the white flag, giving in to everything that Brad Julian said. Chaos suddenly filled the room. The old wolves started tearing into each other, and screaming at the top of their lungs like they'd gone mad. Suddenly a sneaky voice said, "This could be an opportunity." Lord Aiden appeared with his hands folded and that famous fox-like smile on his face. It reminded him that until now, Julian was nothing more than a leash dog for the Imperial family. But the moment he broke his chains and started acting on his own, everything would change completely. This would have been a far more efficient use for him than just freezing him out on the northern front. Chaos is good sometimes, an enraged noble asked. So are we just gonna let that kid run wild? Aiden grinned and said exactly. Meanwhile, Julian was busy kicking back and relaxing after the mission. Plants are bursting out, and the room she decorated to her taste has become a temple of serenity. That greenery had a strange therapeutic effect, calming the soul of even a war machine like him. The last mission was total chaos, but luckily the rumors just vanished. The young man opened his chest full of loot with great eagerness. Inside, that mysterious stone, swallowing the light and glowing blood red, was winking. Finally, Julian thought he could complete his cursed sword using this crimson ore, an idea he'd snatched from the resonant stone. According to game logic, any object could absorb mana, and the Imperial stones were perfect superconductors for this. That was the secret of the resonant stones. Julian decided to borrow the idea and patch it onto his own sword. By giving the object meaning, he'd create a highway, a buffer zone, to transfer energy between the swordsman and the weapon. But at that ominous moment it touched the stone, the jewel shattered into tiny pieces in her hand. Julian realized that ordinary stones wouldn't be enough. He had to find the right stone that could handle his wild mana flow. The door knocked. Was it time for lunch? Julian called out. Is that a belt coming onto the field? When aloud inside, hard-working Lazarus appeared, ready for orders as always. The Imperial Secretariat summoned him personally to request a report. The young man was so shocked he could have swallowed his tongue. He repeated the question to make sure he heard right. then instantly jumped from his chair and sprang into action. As they prepared to leave, Sadik ordered the aide to stuff the remains of that failed experiment into the chest. The secretariat calling him felt fishy, but just as he was about to leave, Lazarus called out from behind. He showed the broken stone pieces in his hand and asked what to do. Julia's answer is clear. Just throw it away. Though his assistant didn't want to ruin those beautiful stones, he obeyed the boss since orders are orders. Julian finally reached the Imperial Secretariat. Compared to that gloomy Shutai building, this place looked like a little palace. The young man identified himself and said he wanted to see the official inside, Seedon Orby. However, the guard at the door said Mr. Orby was in a meeting and put him on hold. Julian was understanding and said he'd wait. The other guest inside was probably much more of a big shot and had a higher status than ours. When he entered the waiting room, he began examining the elegant space he could never see even within the game. Then, a detail in the corner of the room, a sword standing aside, caught his attention. It was strange that a weapon was left so carelessly in such a luxury place. Besides, the sword didn't suit the room at all. It was quite simple. But it was clear in every way it belonged to a master swordsman. Engraved on the scabbard was the phrase, "A sound mind in a sound body," and our hero was positive he'd seen those words somewhere before. A stern voice ordered the young man to remove his hands from that sword at once. But that voice was so familiar, he didn't even need to turn around to know who it belonged to. This is Lady Rumbeldi, a student of the legendary Haydenreich from the Empire's noble knight family. In the game's story, she was the girl whose life was brutally ended by the owner of the very body she is in now, the infamous traitor, Julian Krypart Playson. The memory of that lifeless body. It flashed like lightning in our hero's mind, and now he saw that girl right there in the flesh. As Hayden's student, he could have played a key role in the mission to escape the game. Lynn Rommel was a loyal student, blindly devoted to Haydenreich, with talent that could one day even surpass Julian. He was famous for his obedience. Because of this popularity, producers even designed a special wedding dress for the girl, and she was constantly chosen as a favorite character among players. But now our hero was in Julia's cursed body. And the only energy radiating from the girl was pure, unadulterated hatred. When asked what he was doing with the sword, he said he was just looking. To poke and provoke the girl a bit, he added that he didn't expect his master to leave the sword out in the open like this. When the girl said Hayden didn't like carrying a gun, our guy didn't miss the opportunity. "Or is that him in there?" And cast the line. The girl narrowed her eyes in suspicion and asked why it was any of his business. Julian expressed interest, saying the man had also been his teacher long ago. Her hands shaking with hatred, Rin gripped her sword and screamed in rage, asking how he dared to say such a thing. The provocation was a success. Julian was about to break the tension when the door opened and their conversation was cut short. A man called Ms. Rini to the office. The girl quickly turned around, said a cold goodbye, and added that she hoped never to see him again. But when the official arrived and said Julia was also called to the meeting room, the room went cold. "Ours is just to lighten the mood." With an insolent attitude. "We were trained by the same teacher." He teased, saying we should get along. But the girl was still ice cold. That they weren't the same anymore, as his master's name in that dirty mouth felt like ice. He told them never to buy it again. While Julian was in the body of the man who betrayed him, he felt a strange mix of excitement and tension from meeting his favorite character. When the two youths reached the Imperial Secretary's office, the gentleman greeting them began by congratulating our hero. After all, he had cleared the name of a massive two-horned demon. Rin cut in angrily and asked where his teacher was. It turns out Reich had bailed right after dumping a task on the girl and ordering Julian to accompany her. The blonde beauty was in shock, questioning why she had to go on a mission with this traitor. His master had requested that someone from the Empire accompany him. Because it was a very dangerous mission, and Julian just happened to be there. The mission was to survey the capital's outskirts. The young man asked why they had to deal with such filthy places. Some sources say demons were breeding in these regions, and the locals didn't want the imperial family directly involved. So, it was perfect for these two, who were tied to the empire but not fully part of it. The slums were full of refugees denied entry to the empire. Since they hated the royal family, it made sense to send these students as neutral members. If Ms. Rin performs better than Julian, she could easily snatch the title of Holy Sword Master. The mission might not have been ideal for our hero, but as the crown's lapdog, he had no choice but to accept. Furious, the girl was rejecting something the young man would have been eager to do. But when the man reminded him that the master had chosen this task personally, things changed. It took courage to defy his master's will. After a strange silence, the young woman signaled her understanding. And he started sizing ours up, looking tense. Our hero thought. This knight, who held the title of Hada's student, would likely do everything to keep the young man under control throughout the mission. In his current state, he couldn't even hurt a fly. He's hit rock bottom. If he can't find that stone matching his damn room's mana, it will end in disaster. That shimmer on Rena's neck catches the eye, like a lighthouse in the dark. Dying of curiosity, she clings to the girl and can't help asking what that jewel is. The young woman says it's a moonstone. The stone is practically screaming, "Come get me!" radiating exactly the kind of energy our guy is hunting for like a starving wolf. As she reaches for the necklace, Julian trembles like a hypnotized addict, drawn into that aura. The blonde bombshell is startled by this harassing move, of course. Even if he pretends he was just looking, that brief touch is enough to make his blood boil. That vital piece was now right under his nose. Our obsessed hero wears down the jeweler's doorstep, looking for the exact same one Rena has, and asks the seller if he has any moonstone. But the answer was a total disappointment. These things aren't on the market. Nobody's here except those collector maniacs. Julia's face darkens, not like a spoiled child denied a toy, but like a demon set to burn the world. The seller is about to wet himself from fear. When the man says he'll try to find one right away, he calms down a bit and explains he really needs it. The poor merchant swears to turn the country upside down to save his life. But when mission day arrived, the stones were nowhere to be found. He's breaking into a cold sweat, fearing our hero Rena will notice her sword is missing. The girl rushes ahead, but once he says, "Wrong way," he's frozen in his tracks by that deadly look she gives him. The shantytown is like a labyrinth full of illegal buildings. This isn't a place you'll find with a map or a sign, it's a real Shark Tank. The blonde waving the map in her hand chooses to trust that piece of paper rather than listen to us. Julian thinks she might be right and stays silent. But the East Side is a total hellhole for rookies. Even the game's developers admitted how much they struggled to design this place. Stubborn Goat says he won't fall for our trick. He's imagining there's a traitor trying to sabotage the Holy Swordsman's disciple. With a confident tone, he claims he's not a loser like Julian and that he's on a whole different level. He's definitely going to be the next Holy Swordsman. Ours, however, looks at her with pity, thinking about how wrong she is. It's clear this mission won't be child's play. Two adventurers are at each other's throats over which hellish path to take. Skeptical Rena questions whether Julia knows this area. Actually, he knows it like the back of his hand, but he has to play dumb to keep his identity a secret. If he has no experience, how does he know the way? Our guy says with a smug grin that he's acting purely on intuition. The blonde suggests parting ways, but Julian ruins the escape plan by reminding her of the Imperial Order. Of course, unless the knight prizes his master above the Empire, he shouldn't leave his side. Hearing her teacher's name, the girl roars, "If you have any shame, don't let that name cross your lips." He's literally breathing fire. His hands shake with rage, but deep down, the fact that this annoying guy is stronger than him cuts to the bone. Because he hears everyone comparing the two of them. That cursed sentence echoing in your mind is gnawing at your brain. If it were him, the job would have been done. Poor guy, he still clings to the delusion that he's the heir to the Holy Sword Master. Once out of the dream world, the harsh reality sets in. The signs are a total mess. You can't understand a thing. Julian, who's already realized what's going on, asks what the problem is with a smirk. It's crystal clear that the blonde is missing. When the maps and signs don't match, our confused ducks end up going in circles and returning to the same spot. While the cycle continues, there's a man whose face is a roadmap of scars and bruises. He's calling out to ask if you're lost. This guy Baden wouldn't do this for free, of course. He wants them to buy him a drink in exchange for his help. When the rascal hears the girl's last name, he thinks he's hit the jackpot. Julian tries to intervene, but the guy doesn't care at all. The name sounds familiar to him, but since he can't recall it right away, he figures it's just some minor extra and moves on. Before guiding, he calls out to the bar owner in Baden and has him prepare a drink for everyone. The bartender takes one look at those guys, thinks they're suckers, and instantly updates the price. It's 30 nars each. The man smirks and says life is expensive around here. It's a daylight robbery. But when our rich girl pulls out the money, she shocks everyone by saying this price is dirt cheap. The guy's eyes are bulging and sparkling, seeing all that gold. Being a rich snob is something else, of course. The scammer pulls the bartender aside and asks him to add a special mixture to the drinks. The plan is to get him drunk and rob him. The bartender does as told, and 3 large mugs arrive at the table. My little blonde airhead, putting the cup straight to her mouth. Just as he's about to sip the poison, Julian steps in. He calmly examines the liquid with the air of a cool detective. He makes his voice sound so scary that when he asks if he drugged his drink, he starts sweating bullets. Our hero, playing it safe, hands the cup to the man and says, "You drink first." Or she's threatening to force-feed it to me. Unaware of what's happening, Rina starts scolding her partner, thinking he's causing trouble again. As soon as that name leaves the girl's mouth, the penny drops hard for Bade. The terrified bar owner's knees tremble as he asks how they let the Empire's infamous lapdog into his shop. Beads of sweat on her face, Baden tries to wiggle out of it, mumbling that everything's fine. As usual, his loyal gang of the roughest, meanest types from the slums are loitering in the corners. And they've already noticed the tension inside. Baden quietly reaches for the cold metal beneath his coat. The sword with its shimmering hilt shows that it also intends to join the dance. Losing his patience, Julian announces their time is up and braces himself for the inevitable brawl. The moment our hero moves, those thuggish sidekicks attack in a swarm. But Julian, with lightning speed, grabs one by the throat and neutralizes him. Another one sneaks up from behind, ready to swing his weapon, but the attack misses as our hero dodges with a swift maneuver. As the henchmen bite the dust one by one, a bewildered Rina panics and grabs her sword. The guys who were acting like tough bullies just a moment ago are now shaking with fear. Our boy, solid as a rock, doesn't know what these punks are after, but it's better if no more trouble breaks out in the neighborhood. The tip of Julia's sword is practically flirting with the thief's jugular. Judging by the way they're acting, these guys are all his mercenaries. Since that's the case, our hero tells Baden to give his men one last order to retreat, or things will get ugly, and someone will end up shattered just like that beer glass. The guy is trembling inside, but he still tries to make a move by showing off his purple aura. Even as his men move, Baden, trapped in despair, screams at the top of his lungs for them to retreat. Fearing what's coming, those 2 sidekicks flee the place without looking back. If this young man answers a few questions, Julian guarantees he will turn him over to the authorities in one piece. Surrendering is better than pushing up daisies for a thief, but the choice is Bade's. Our guy is asking again what the man prefers. Death or surrender? Cornered by the Baden, Juliana decides to wave the white flag. The man's help was suspicious from the start, but finding out he's a full-time operative for a crime syndicate even surprises our guy. At least the duo manages to extract useful information from this chaos. Rina's overcome with guilt, her shoulders slumped, eating herself up for dragging them into this mess. Julian immediately notices that the girl's old self-confidence is long gone. The young woman wonders how the swordsman knew that he spiked the thief's drinks. Our boy's playing it mysterious, asking if she really wants to know. Our blonde girl shows unexpected maturity, saying she'd rather learn a lesson even if it comes from someone she hates. And of course, that unnecessary hate. Everything would be sweeter without it. Julian explains that thanks to his mana detection ability, he felt the thick killing intent both in the drink and the location itself. Aware of the risk, he used his sense like a radar to detect hostility even before entering the bar. It's almost the same principle bats use for navigation. This technique is usually for mages, but since his mana is like an ocean, this detective work is child's play for him. Still not satisfied, the blonde fires off another question. He's stuck on why you asked about life in the slums instead of asking about the demon's location. Rina thought her mission was to deal with demons, not the neighbors. But Julian confirms that's the goal and asks how much she knows about the demonization. The blonde explains that this phenomenon starts with Barbados residues attaching like parasites to all non-human living things, turning them into demons. But with resonant stones in the outskirts, it's impossible for these creatures to infiltrate. This leaves only one terrifying possibility: the fact that the hosts are humans themselves. Because of his game knowledge, Julian knows like the back of his hand that there are cases of demon possession in this area. For Rina, believing this ghost story is almost impossible. Our boy goes on to say that 3 families bought fever reducers last week, and that's the first sign of the transformation. The girl is still in disbelief, acting skeptical. As the day ends and the sun sets, the young woman, her spirits lifted, says there's one last house to check. Since they haven't found any signs of demonization yet, she thinks it's great news. With this vibe of toxic positivity, they're close to finishing the mission. Julian knocks on the door and calls out to see if anyone is inside. An eerie man with bloodshot eyes opens the door. Even if there's no sign of demonic change, his defensive aura screams that he's hiding something. Also, that smell, that familiar and disgusting smell Julia sensed during her resonant stone mission. It's the foul stench of that acrid demon bodily fluid. The calm young man introduces himself. But when he learns he's from the Union of Closed Eyes, his expression turns into a horror movie. He starts shouting at them to leave. But Julian holds the door open with his foot, not letting this tense scene come to an end. Julian throws the poor old man inside and forces his way in, as if he were just a bag of trash. The poor guy's in shock. He at least expected a hello or an explanation, poor soul. But in Julia's eyes, her partner is totally naive, and she has no idea that this sunny-side-up attitude will be the end of her. When they entered, our daughter was still shaking like a leaf, because they didn't have a warrant for home invasion, of course. But our main guy is stone cold. The Empire wants heads. Who cares how it was gotten? Intelligence says an old man and his son live in this house. So 2 people. But what's that? The table is set for 3. The old man sweating and rambling on about a guest coming to inspect the food. Julian tests the soup with a spoon and realizes the consistency is like concrete. It clicks right away. The old man spiked the soup with sleeping pills. The blonde girl is speechless at her partner's toxic skills, clearly meant for that special guest, that horrific creature behind the door. The old man panics and rushes to the door with all his might. To your son. Run and save yourself, shouting. In that cursed second he grabs the key and tries to unlock it. The door cracks open, even as the poor man thinks he's taking his final breath. Suddenly a massive, hideous mouth appears and gobbles the old man up right there. The screams are blood-curdling. There really was a giant from hell behind the door. Rina immediately reaches for her weapon, horrified by how a person could become such a freak. If that's the case, this creature must be unplugged immediately. The girl's sword whizzes toward the beast's eyes, but the creature swats her against the wall like a fly. Luckily, no bones are broken, and our warrior recovers. Julian instantly recognizes the sword in her hand as the one from before the famous awakening. So that's why he was talking about mana. This mission isn't for a rookie. Our guy immediately steps in to protect the girl. Of course, this makes our feisty blonde angry. Turns out the lady doesn't need any help. Julian gives a "don't interfere" look as he draws his sword. After all, he cannot let the Holy Swordmaster's only student die. The main issue is the Moonlight Sword is still in beta, but it's better to try it than to raise suspicion. As the monster approaches, our hero knows he must end this. Like activating cheat codes, he triggers his new ability to predict movements and scan for weak points. Instantly blinding the monster with a beam of light, he slides through its legs with a stylish maneuver. Julian is like a strategic genius, creating an opening for Rina to strike, leaving the enemy totally blindsided. Our girl gets hyped up and charges the monster with a sword, going all out. But the monster's reflexes deflect the strikes like poison. Julian's shouting for her to stall him, but the poor girl's fighting for her life. Wrangling that creature is next to impossible. That's when something catches Rina's eye. He grabs the pot of slimy food and dumps it right in the monster's face. The creature clutches its eyes in pain and confusion. The monster's face is covered in food scraps, he's totally dazed. Rena starts focusing, saying the lady is here. He'll put all his meaning, soul, and everything into his next strike. But while he focuses, the monster's giant claw comes crashing down. Even if the creature is blind, its nose is like a hound's. It finds the girl by her scent and slaps her down. The result? Our blonde Julia is messing up the distraction task she wanted. If he sinks into the ground in shame, how will he look his master in the eye? Just as the monster opened its huge mouth, showing its razor-sharp teeth. Suddenly, a cry for Rena echoes through the air.